Hello, and welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast, where we learn about the ocean, share sea stories, and explore ocean careers. I'm your host, Kara Muzia. Let's dive into today's episode. Hey, do you want to help the oceans? Have you considered a career in marine biology, but maybe just aren't sure where to start? Head on over to my website, marinebio.life, and subscribe to my newsletter. When you subscribe, you'll receive a free PDF download where you'll learn the 7 steps to becoming a marine biologist without the degree. Today, we're going to chat with Jessica Pate, who is the project manager for the Marine Megafauna Foundation of the Americas. Jessica studies manta rays off Florida's Atlantic coast. We chat about how a North Carolina girl traveled the high seas, literally, and ended up finding her calling studying these winged wonders. Without further ado, here's Jessica. Alrighty, so what inspired you to become a marine biologist, and how is it the same or different than what you had imagined?
Yeah, so growing up, I guess the consistent thing I always knew I wanted to do was to work with animals in some way. I always thought maybe I would be like some kind of large animal veterinarian, or after seeing Free Willy, I thought maybe I would be an orca trainer. When I went to college, I really didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, other than the fact that I wanted to do something good for the world and I didn't want to be behind a desk. So that led me to majoring in environmental science. And even though I'd always kind of leaned towards marine science, I hadn't really set that as my goal even after graduating college. It actually wasn't until I got scuba certified that I was like, I definitely want to study the marine world. After graduating college, I moved to Costa Rica and worked on a sea turtle nesting beach down in the Osa Peninsula of Costa Rica. And when I came back to the States, honestly, I was just looking for any job in particular, but since I had sea turtle experience, I was applying for some jobs on sea turtle nesting beaches, and I actually ended up getting 2, one in Texas and one in Florida, and ended up choosing to come down to Florida and work with Ecological Associates.
I didn't realize you had spent time in Costa Rica. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was really great. It definitely cemented more for me that I wanted to always try to involve travel in my work, and I really like working in remote places. It brings its own set of challenges, but it's also very interesting.
Yeah, I could see that. You came back to Florida, and then that's when you kind of got your master's while you were...
So it wasn't as direct a route to getting my master's degree. I spent probably 3 years working in the summers on the turtle nesting beaches in Florida, and then in the winters I would go work on a project in a different country. So I did that for 3 years, and then once I realized I couldn't get the types of jobs that I really wanted to without a higher degree is when I decided to go back to graduate school.
That makes sense. What are some of the other jobs that you were doing?
So I did another sea turtle research assistant position in Ghana in West Africa, involved tagging turtles at night and researching mostly the olive ridley. And then I also ended up working at a dive shop in Honduras and getting my professional dive certification.
What was your thesis on in college then?
So graduate school, my experience might have been a little different than typical graduate student experience. My original thesis was looking at when during development do sea turtles imprint on the Earth's magnetic field. So this involves manipulating the magnetic field around turtle nests and then testing the hatchling sea turtles for their navigational or orientation abilities. I did this experiment for 2 years, staying up all night in the lab and watching turtles swim around in circles in the dark. And basically that didn't yield any conclusive results. The things I really wanted to, when I went out into graduate school, I had some very clear goals. And these goals were, I wanted to present at a scientific conference and publish a scientific paper. And after talking with my committee and going over my experimental results, they didn't feel like these results would be worthy of that. So in my last semester of graduate school, I ended up completely changing my entire thesis and using some data that was already collected and doing a thesis on how the body proportions of young sea turtles change through development and how that might be related to their ecology and evolutionary pressures.
What'd you find?
Basically that we were comparing the hard-shelled turtles, the green and loggerhead turtles, to the leatherback turtles. We basically found that leatherback turtles are developing this deeper body plan. That's probably related to the fact that they are going to become deeper divers and they have to prepare their bodies to handle colder waters when they're older. The loggerheads and green turtles are developing body plans that are likely more suited for predation defense, since they're a lot smaller than the leatherbacks. The leatherbacks are probably outsizing the predators a lot faster than the hard-shelled turtles.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but my advisor is actually still, 6 years later, is still doing those magnetic experiments that I began. And I think he pretty much has very similar results to what I've got.
Yeah, I was going to say that didn't sound like a couple-year master's thesis. That sounded like a really long, in-depth study.
The problem with it was it's difficult to do because when you're working on an endangered species, obviously my sample size was very limited to what I could get a permit for. And since there's only a certain season for hatchlings, you can't work on it all year round. You can only work on it during a specific time of year. My sample size was always very small, and I had very little room for error. So my first season, I had a hurricane come through, which already knocked down my already really small sample size. I don't know, they're interesting experiments, but it's something to think about for people who are going to grad school is you need to think about something that you can actually for sure get data from, because doing field work, it is not always guaranteed.
Nature does her own thing sometimes. Most of the time, actually. Are you dive instructor? What's your level of certification?
I'm a dive instructor. Yeah, well, I actually had never planned on becoming a dive instructor. That was actually like a plan C for me. If the biology career didn't work out, I thought I could always go get my dive instructor certification and at least live somewhere cool. But after graduate school, I got a job teaching marine biology on a sailboat to college students, and that job actually wanted me to be a dive instructor, so they paid for me to get that certification.
That's pretty awesome. I mean, I feel like that's kind of the ideal setting. Like, we're going to learn about this, and now we're going to go dive and see that. Where did you go with the sailboat?
So that company, it's called Seamaster, has 2 sailboats. One that sails around the Caribbean. They basically do a loop from the British Virgin Islands to Grenada and back, all the islands in between. And the other sailboat sails around the world, just works its way around the world every couple years. But I was mostly in the Caribbean for that job, which is it's really fun to teach marine biology. And then you're experiencing marine biology every day, from even like what you're looking at when you're sailing to when you're diving. It's a really fun way to teach.
It's awesome. And that's a position that your master's degree afforded you to have, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Because in grad school, in order to get a stipend and tuition waivers, I was a teaching assistant. And honestly, that was the thing I was not looking forward to about grad school. I was really nervous about it. I was dreading it. And it actually turned out to be one of my favorite things about grad school. I really loved teaching. Even though I was teaching anatomy, something I honestly didn't know that much about going into it. So I learned while teaching. I found that I really love teaching students and interacting with them and helping figure out ways to explain things and get your students to understand. And it's even more fun when you're teaching something that you're really passionate about. So when I left grad school, I was open to teaching positions, and I happened to get one that involved teaching and being able to travel and dive and kind of combine a lot of the things I was interested in into one job.
That's pretty awesome. What is the coolest project that you've worked on?
I mean, not to brag, but the one I just started is my favorite.
That's good. So tell us a little bit more about that then.
To go rewind maybe 7 or 8 years when I was first doing those sea turtle jobs in Florida when I was in my early 20s. Those involved getting up in the morning and riding down the beach or on the ATV counting the sea turtle tracks from the night before. We were basically out on the beach all day, and sometimes when I was out there, I would see these like big dark shapes swimming next to shore. I didn't know what they were. And when I found out that they were actually manta rays, and I did some like Google searching and asking around, and found out that no one knew anything about manta rays in Florida. And I found that kind of mind-boggling, since they're this like big, very charismatic species. There's so many marine biologists in Florida. Like, why hasn't anyone studied them before? And I actually originally tried to study them in grad school. Just long story short, it didn't work out. And I've just had that project in the back of my head for years and years and years now. And after I left my job on the sailboat, I came back to Florida and took another job in environmental consulting, but it wasn't really what I wanted to be doing. So I was just looking for a passion project. So I decided on my days off to go out and just see if I could even find manta rays, because I had never even explored that topic, if it was possible to locate them from a boat. Because a lot of people I talked to down here told me that it wasn't going to be possible. So my boyfriend and I went out on our days off from work, and that was in 2016, and we found that we could find manta rays. I wouldn't say it's easily, but you could definitely find them with regularity. And since then, we've just been learning more and more interesting things about them.
That's pretty awesome. So you have a day job, and this is kind of like a passion project that you started.
That I'm currently trying to turn into a job.
I mean, I actually think I don't know, it's pretty awesome. It's like very entrepreneurial and like true passion in science.
You have to be passionate about it, or else you wouldn't do it.
Right. So you have linked up with Marine Megafauna Foundation. How did that come about?
So Andrea Marshall is one of the founders of the Marine Megafauna Foundation. She's a leading manta expert around the world. She's the one who split the manta genus into two species about 10 years ago. And we had actually been in touch back in grad school when I wanted to do this for a project. And she was very, very supportive and encouraging. But since it didn't work out, we lost touch for a little bit. But when I decided to start looking into the project again back in 2016, I contacted her and let her know that I was doing it. And she gave me some advice and was really excited by what we were finding. Because there is another research project on mantas in Florida up north, with the Georgia Aquarium is studying a seasonal aggregation there. But the problem with the northern project is you can't get in the water and do any in-water research because of the turbidity. So she was really excited to learn that there was a place in Florida where you could actually get in the water with the mantas and learn about the individuals, which is a typical data collection method for studying these animals. Last year, we decided to collaborate on this project together, since she is an expert and is a huge help to me all the time.
That's awesome. Explain, why do you have to get in the water? Why is that such a big part of the process?
Yeah, so doing these kinds of studies where you want to learn about the life history of these animals, it can be really helpful to be able to identify individuals. That's why with a lot of turtle studies I used to do before, you're actually putting tags in the turtle. So you can know if this turtle is returning to nest, how many times it has nested in a season, how many eggs it laid in a season, and how many years it takes off between nesting. You know, if you don't know who the individual is, you can't know that information. And so with manta rays, you don't have to put a tag on them to do that, because they kind of have a natural tag, so to speak, which is the spot patterns on their belly are unique to each individual manta, kind of like a human fingerprint. And so if you get in the water and get a photo of the belly of a manta ray, then you can identify that individual. And then based on that, you can learn about how long they're spending in an area. If we see that manta over and over again, we know that it's residing in that area for a certain amount of time. If that manta is resighted somewhere else, you can learn about the migration patterns of these individuals or populations just by with the photo of their bellies.
That's pretty awesome. How often do you re-sight them elsewhere?
So far, none of our mantas has been resighted outside of Florida.
Okay.
We've had some people within Florida recite the mantas I'm studying. And this could be for a number of reasons. It could be maybe they're not venturing outside of Florida, or maybe they're venturing to places where people aren't in the water as much. You know, if they're maybe going up the eastern seaboard of the United States where the in-water visibility isn't as good and there aren't as many divers, you know, they could very easily be missed. They could be going, you know, out into really deep water off our coast, and obviously they wouldn't be seen there. So those are all the questions that I would like to answer eventually. But MMF has a global online database called Manta Matcher, which you can access at mantamatcher.org. And this is a platform where divers can actually become citizen scientists. And if they see a manta ray underwater and get a photo or a video of its belly, then they can upload that. And that photo will go to researchers so we can add those individuals to our databases. And around the world, that has been really, really helpful with manta research, especially in some places like Asia and Africa. They've gotten a lot of data that way. And currently, right now, I'm trying to educate more people here in Florida and maybe in areas around the Caribbean as well about that, because I think a lot of people just don't know about it. So maybe they see a manta and take a picture, but aren't reporting it to anybody.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. I mean, just knowing you, I knew about the individual spots thing, but I just learned last week about the Manta Matcher, so that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I've been trying to really spread it around to the dive shops, but since dive shops very rarely, they don't see manta rays that much here, at least on the dive sites. It's a fairly rare occurrence. But even then, I've still had a dive shop this year, or the end of last year, report one of our mantas that they saw on a local wreck.
Very cool.
So it's about spreading the word.
Absolutely. So where else are mantas located in the world?
Manta rays are found circumglobally. There's two species of manta ray. The reef manta, Manta alfredi, tends to be located in more tropical areas and more in Asia and off the coast of Eastern Africa. The giant manta ray, Manta barostris, can go up into more temperate waters or cooler waters. Is located more in the Americas. It's also sympatric with the reef mantas in some places in Asia and Africa, which is how Andrea Marshall figured out that there were two species, because she just happened to study mantas in one of the few places where both of these species can be seen at the same time, which is really interesting. And what we think right now is that there's a possible third species that would be endemic, which means that it'd be only found in the Western Atlantic and the Caribbean. So those would be the mantas that I would be studying. But we're still researching that.
Interesting. So between the two species, is it just size that's the difference? How did you determine between the species, and then how would you determine the third species?
So the differences between the two species are, one, the giant manta, or the oceanic manta, as its name suggests, is larger. They can reach sizes of up to 7 meters, or like 22, 23 feet. The reef manta is smaller, but it's still big. They can reach sizes of up to like 5 meters. And there's some differences in their dorsal and ventral colorations, the distribution of their spots on their bellies, and the presence or absence of a caudal spine, which is basically like a little remnant spine on their tail. So those are the main attributes you can use to visually see the differences between the two species. And there's some other stuff you could look at, but you would need a microscope to look at some of the skin and teeth differences.
Pretty interesting. Pretty incredible, really. So this is the coolest project you've worked on. Do you have a favorite field story or stories to tell, like best or worst day? And that doesn't have to be like manta related. It could be anytime in your marine biology career. I know there's got to be a couple.
I can go with the weirdest, maybe. I think one of the most memorable that stands out is when I was working in Ghana. Me and my colleague, a guy named Joe, who was one of the local villagers who worked on the project, were out on our ATV one night, we came across a dead turtle, which was not uncommon at all. And we still collect data on the dead turtles. So I was stopping my ATV to, measure and check out the dead turtle. And this guy starts approaching us on the beach, and Joe starts yelling at me. I mean, like, Jessica, drive, 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 drive. And I'm like, but Joe, there's a turtle here. And he was like, drive, 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 drive. So I just speed off down the beach, not knowing what is going on. There were some people like on the beach with the bonfire behind this guy who had approached us, which I'd never really seen before, but I wasn't concerned about. There's people on the beach all the time. And Joe was really weird for about an hour. He wouldn't tell me what was going on. And then he eventually told me that if that guy had approached me, he was going to take me to the fire and make me eat goat. And that if I eat the goat, that I would never be able to go home again. And that I would have to live in that village for the rest of my life wearing the same clothes that I was wearing then. So I'm pretty sure that had to do with some kind of different village. It was a different village than he was from, so maybe there were some village superstitions that were playing into that. We never went back to that part of the beach that night, so I really don't know what would have happened or what that guy was approaching us about. But still, when you're out on the beach in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, and people are telling you scary stuff, it can be a little creepy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That would definitely stick in my memory.
So the moral of the story is don't eat the goat.
Don't eat the goat. It's a, good lesson, good life lesson there. So what's the favorite part about your job?
My favorite part about it is developing all these questions and starting very slowly to get the answers to them. And it's like my favorite part about being a scientist in general is, you go out into the field and see something and it just prompts you to think of all these other things you want to know. And, a lot of these questions that I want to answer are going to take probably years of being out in the field to learn the answers to. But that's one of the most exciting things about it is that one day we will know the answer to these questions that no one has known before. And that's what keeps me doing it. And also to protect these creatures that we see a lot of adverse interactions with humans on these manta rays that I'm studying, and it's also a big part of what I want to do is try to reduce or negate these interactions if possible.
So what are some of the things that you see with the mantas?
What we mostly see about almost a third of the mantas we see either are entangled or are foul hooked with fishing line. This can be problematic. Sometimes if it's wrapped too tightly around them, it's obviously hurting them and causing injury. But also if they have a lot of line hanging off of them and that line gets caught on something, manta rays are ram ventilators. So they have to keep on swimming through the water in order to breathe. So if this line gets caught on something and they can't swim anymore, then they can suffocate and die. So we're trying to figure out when and where these interactions are occurring. Actually, we've been working on that today. We're going to develop a study and try to figure out exactly how these interactions are occurring and what the best way what we can do to mitigate them.
Do you have any hypotheses about this, or is it still too early to tell?
It's probably pretty too early to tell. I really don't know. I mean, it could be that fishermen are casting underneath them to catch fish. A lot of times, other fish will hang out under big fish.
Right.
Although I don't see game fish hanging under these mantas like you would see in some other places. So that's a possibility. It could be they don't know what a manta ray is and just cast at it. The mantas could be just swimming into the lines, possibly. Yeah, so I really don't know, and that's why I want to do a formal study of it to make sure we get the real answers.
That's pretty awesome. Curious to see what you all come up with.
Me too.
So if listeners want to, how can they help with mantas?
Yeah, so one of the great ways to do it is what I mentioned before. If you're a diver in the water with a camera and you see a manta ray, get a picture of that spot pattern on the belly and report it to Manta Matcher. There's lots of cool projects you can volunteer with. Around the world, MMF has projects in Mozambique and Indonesia. Most of these projects have volunteer programs where you can go and either be an intern or a research assistant or a volunteer and dive and contribute to manta research.
Awesome. What advice would you give to somebody who wants to be a marine biologist, or what advice should they ignore?
So advice for being a marine biologist, you need to make sure that you really want to do it. It's a very difficult career, but I would encourage anyone who wants to pursue it. But I think my biggest piece of advice would be get experience in some different things that will make you more marketable. Like if that's getting a professional dive certification or getting a captain's certification. One thing I would kill to know how to do is to service boat engines. I think that should be a mandatory class for a marine biology degree because
it kind of should be.
It would save me a lot of money and a lot of stress to be able to do all of it myself. So it's stuff like that that you don't think of, like knowing the science and the theory and how to collect data is all really important, and that should all be done. But you can also do all these other things that make you a more desirable person for a job and will make you more confident.
Yeah, absolutely. That would definitely make you somebody that you can count on in the field, which is always good to have around. So I feel like I know the answer to this question, but it could have surprised me. What's your favorite sea creature?
I mean, honestly, manta rays are my favorite by and far. They're the coolest because, like, other than marine mammals, there's no other creature in the sea that's that, like, curious about you and, seems to possess, like, a higher level intelligence. It's really rare to see. But, that being said, like, when I go diving, half the time I'm taking pictures of, like, the teeniest, tiniest blennies and stuff. I love everything out there. So I'm not too picky. I'm happy as long as I'm in the water.
Thanks for being on the podcast.
No problem.
Now Jessica and I would love to hear from you. What was one thing you learned from today's episode? Was it a manta fact, or was it something else? Comment below the show notes over at marinebio.life or send us an email at hello@marinebio.life. We read every single one. Have you ever wanted to explore the underwater realm but aren't sure how to get dive certified? I've got you covered. Head over to marinebio.life/scuba for beginners and grab your copy of my new scuba guide. In it, I cover the different certifying agencies, gear, lingo, and the number one thing to look out for when you're getting certified. This guide will leave you confident in how to become certified and ready to dive in. Head on over to marinebio.life/scuba for beginners to get your copy and get diving already. marinebio.life/scuba for beginners. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. It helps other ocean enthusiasts find us. And we'll catch you next time on the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast.